Going to be talking about reproduction control. This is chapter 4 in your textbook, unit B. The section that I'm going to be explaining is 4.1, and this is that the nervous system responds and controls. There's three main key concepts that you need to know for this section. The first one is that senses connect the human body to the external environment. The central nervous system controls functions. And the last one is the peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves. So this section is going to take a look at each of these three key concepts. The first term that I want to start off this section with is homeostasis. Now remember, I described this earlier in the year as this is the need for the body to maintain balance in order to survive. So how is this optimum condition of balance maintained within the body? It is due to the communication between our sense organs and our nervous system. So our sense organs give us the ability to see and smell, touch and hear and taste. So for the example, your eyes and your ears, nose, those are all sense organs. So when these sense organs detect a stimulus, which is a change in the environment that we can react to, then it's going to send signals to the brain in order to cause you to have a reaction. Okay, so say for example that you hear a very loud penetrating sound. Your reaction is going to be to cover up your ears. So those always go hand in hand together. The sense organ of sight is obviously the eye. So the eye is used to capture light and help to turn it into an image, which is then going to be processed by the brain. I have provided you with a very brief overview of how light travels through the human eye. The first step that the light is going to encounter is passing through the cornea. Now the cornea is essentially a thin membrane that covers the eye, and this is the first convex lens that the light is going to encounter. Now remember, convex lenses are going to cause refraction of the incoming light. After the light passes through the cornea, it's going to then continue through the pupil. The pupil is the dark circular opening which appears black, and it's surrounded by the colored portion of your eye, and this is known as the iris. Now the iris has muscles in it which will help to either contract or dilate the pupil, and this will help to determine how much light will enter your eye. After this point, the third step is that the light is then going to pass through the lens, and this is also another convex lens. So the lens is going to further refract the light, and this is going to help to adjust for near and far objects. Now the lens is also attached to tiny muscles on either end, and this basically helps to contract or either relax the lens so that the amount of refraction can be controlled in order to allow the image to be focused exactly on the retina. Now the image has to focus on this retina in order for us to perceive the image. If it does not, then we will not see anything in front of us. The retina, which is the furthest and the last layer of the eye that I'm going to be speaking about, contains specialized cells that respond to light. Now once these cells receive the light, it's then going to send electrical signals through the optic nerve to the brain, and then the brain is going to interpret it. So as you can see here, I included a diagram. You can see the object is the candle, and what happens is that light gets emitted from the candle. Remember, the first layer it's going to pass through is the thin membrane known as the cornea, which is going to cause the most refraction of the incoming light. This will cause the light to pass through the pupil, which is the dark opening, and the iris, which is the colored part, is going to adjust the diameter of the pupil. So on a very dim day, if there's not a lot of light, the pupil is going to dilate to allow for maximum light to enter the eye. And if on a very bright day, the pupil is going to constrict and become very small so that not a lot of light can enter the eye. The next convex lens that the eye the light is going to encounter is the lens. Now this lens is going to further refract the light so that it could focus directly on this yellow layer, which we know as the retina. Now, as you could see here, that the image that forms on the retina is an inverted image of the object. So this inverted image of the object is going to be sent via the optical nerve to the brain, where the brain is going to fix it right side up and interpret it. And that is basically how we see objects. The second sense organ I'm talking about is the sense organ of hearing, the ear. Now, the ear perceives and interprets sound waves, and these vibrations will then be sent to the brain. Now, I provided you with a very brief overview of how we interpret sound waves and basically how we hear. So the ear can be divided into the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So the outer ear is basically what we see if you look in the mirror. So if sound waves are produced, and remember sound waves are produced simply by vibrations of air particles, these vibrations will then be cause the eardrum to vibrate. So the sound waves which cause air particles to vibrate will then be sent to the eardrum, and the eardrum will then vibrate. Once these vibrations reach the middle ear, the three small bones known as the hammer, anvil, and stirrup will then also begin to vibrate. These vibrations will then reach the cells in the cochlea, and the cells in the cochlea have very tiny hair cells on them. Once these hair cells and the fluid within the cochlea begin to vibrate, then this is going to be converted to electrical impulse, which will be sent to the brain, and then the brain will interpret what we're hearing. So please take a look at the diagram and follow the steps. So we begin at the outer ear with the air particles vibrating, causing the eardrum to vibrate. These vibrations will be sent to the middle ear, causing the three small bones to vibrate, and then these vibrations will then cause the hair cells and the fluid within the cochlea to vibrate, and then this will be turned into electrical impulse and sent to the brain for interpretation. Touch is another stimulus. So we have tiny sensory receptors in the skin that help us to perceive pressure, temperature, or pain so that the brain can be alerted if you are in danger. So for example, as I told you in the beginning, if you were to put your finger accidentally on a hot stove, immediately you are going to sense the hot temperature. And this is going to cause an electrical impulse to be sent to your brain so that your brain can tell you to immediately remove your finger. Now, we have nerves in the epidermis layer of the skin which senses different textures. So textures are either a smooth surface or a rough surface. So remember, if you talk about the layers of the skin, epidermis is the superficial layer of the skin. So these nerves lie within this surface in order to detect what kind of surface you are touching. The innermost layer of the skin is known as the dermis, and nerves in the dermis sense pressure. So you could see here that sense organs in the skin are basically the sensory receptors that will help you to detect pressure, temperature, or pain. Smell. Well, we know that the sense organ for smell is the nose. Now, the sense of smell and taste involve processing chemical information, whereas sight and touch and hearing involve processing physical information, because with sight we see, with touch we're feeling, and with hearing we're perceiving sound. Those are all physical information. Now, with smell, it's processing chemical information because we know that the scent particles are going to enter our nose and reach a patch of tissue in the back upper part of the nose. Now, this patch of tissue grows hair-like fibers that's covered in mucus, and this is known as the olfactory bulb. When the scent chemicals in the air enter the nose and these stick to this mucus in the olfactory bulb, they then bind to the receptors in the hair-like fibers. The receptors are then going to send signals to the brain and you will smell the scent. The next stimulus I'll be talking about is taste. Now, the sense organ for taste is known as the tongue. The tongue, along with the throat and the roof of the mouth, is covered with small sensory structures called taste buds. Now, each taste bud includes about 100 sensory cells that are specialized to detect chemicals in the food. There's only 4 types of taste buds that we have. We have sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. If you take a look at the diagram in the next slide of the tongue, you can see that the sour is on the outermost part of the tongue. Then we have the salty and sweet taste buds at the bottom or lower part of the tongue, and the bitter is at the roof of the tongue. In the middle of the tongue, we do not have a lot of taste buds. So the important thing to know here is that the tongue is the sense organ for taste, and the reason that we can taste different types of food is due to the taste buds. Now, the next main concept of this section is that the central nervous system controls functions. So it's important to know that the central nervous system consists of 2 parts. We have the brain, which is located within the skull, and the spinal cord, which is located within the vertebrae bones or the spine. And that extends from your neck all the way to your lower back. Now, this spinal cord is very soft and fleshy, so it is protected by the spine, which are the vertebrae bones that you would see in X-ray. The brain is a very complex organ. An adult brain contains about 100 billion nerve cells, and these nerve cells are called neurons. The brain controls voluntary behavior that we voluntarily do, as well as involuntary responses, which are basically beyond our control. The spinal cord is a continuation of the brainstem, and the brainstem, if you look at the previous diagram, is the very lower part of the brain. Now, the spinal cord is about 45 centimeters long and weighs 35 to 40 grams. The spinal cord is a double-layered tube with an outer layer of nerve fibers wrapped in tissue and an inner layer of nerve cell bodies, and a central canal that runs through the entire length of the cord. Now, what exactly is a spinal nerve? We have 31 pairs of nerve that arise from the spinal cord. These nerves will carry impulses to the spinal cord, which will then be carried to the brain for interpretation. Remember, spinal nerves can also send impulses to muscles and glands, so it's important that spinal nerves communicate with the brain and can also communicate with muscles and glands, where it can cause the muscle to contract and bring about movement, and it can communicate with glands and cause perhaps the excretion of hormones. So that was the central nervous system. So remember, the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and these two together will control functions. Now, the peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves, and these nerves are found throughout the entire body. Both motor and sensory nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system. So sensory nerves are those nerves that receive information from the environment caused due to a stimulus and pass it to the central nervous system, whereas motor nerves send signals to the muscles in order to allow you to move. So this includes both voluntary and involuntary responses. So this is where it starts to get confusing. You have the voluntary nervous system, which will monitor movement and functions that can be controlled consciously, so that is when you decide to walk or you decide to take a drink of water. The autonomic nervous system is responsible for the involuntary responses. Now, the 2 divisions of the autonomic nervous system we are going to be talking about include the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. If you take a look at the next slide, you could see that the parasympathetic and sympathetic parts of the autonomic nervous system, they're actually complete opposite to one another. The parasympathetic is known as rest and digest, whereas the sympathetic is known for flight and flight. Now, fight and flight will kick in when you're feeling in danger, or in stressful situations. And the parasympathetic is when you want to relax.